You should be looking at my outline here for the webinar here today on the residential version of Electrical Bid Manager. Couple things before we get started, just as far as what the program does. It's really a different program for those of you that are familiar with the commercial program. It's more based on unit pricing, even though the unit pricing is based on material and labor costs. It's more of a unit price program where each assembly has a price for the entire assembly. We'll get into more of that later. Also, this program is really designed more for the routine tract homes, maybe even a semi-custom home, not so much the high-end custom homes, and especially not the multifamily types of apartments and condos and things like that. All of those things you can do very well in the commercial program. The commercial program has all the appropriate residential and commercial assemblies that you need to do those kind of more involved projects. This is really designed for the simple, straightforward, repetitive tract homes and that kind of thing. So we'll get started here. We're going to start with some things in the setup that you need to understand and get set up properly, because the residential program is an entirely separate setup from the commercial program. One of the things that's the same is the program setup. Under settings, if you go to program settings, there's a tab for company where you can put your company name and address, because that comes out on some of the reports. The company name comes out on every report, to my knowledge. And then if you get into some of the form letters for proposals and other reports, it'll pick up the information from the other fields as well. So that's under settings and program settings. Under this first tab, this is company. Now the default settings for the residential program, again, are just for residential. So under default settings and job, when you go to residential, you'll get some of the same options you have in the commercial version, but these are just for the residential version. Now under job allocation, you want to click on sales tax and make sure you've got your local rate in there. So every time you start a new job, it's going to apply that sales tax to your material costs. And like all the default settings, you can always adjust them, change them in the job. They're just that, they're defaults. Now under job settings, if you come to this tab here that says extensions, you can set up your labor rates, your crew for your residential jobs, because we realize it may be different than what you do for commercial work. So in this example, my crew is half electricians and half helpers, 50-50 on the percentages. These are the base rates. They would be what the electricians see on their paycheck. And the burden adds in the additional cost to the employer for the payroll taxes, federal and state. If most states have a portion that's paid to the state, and then that should also include your additional workers' comp, your general liability, and your benefits. So that may take a little bit of homework to get a good handle on that number, but in this example, and that's just an example, not meant to be anything that you should look at as an average. Labor rates vary, significantly throughout the country. But this 27 for my example here is the average of a crew that's half journeymen and half helpers. So we'll hit OK here. We'll hit OK again. The other job setup that's important is under settings, default settings for takeoff, and again, residential. So even though the program is going to give you a unit price for every assembly, it's based on materials that are partially determined from this part of the program. Anytime there's a wiring assembly that has Romex or any other type of wire built into it, it picks up these default links for that type of assembly. So switches, receptacles, and fixtures are set to 20 feet. Home runs are set, and dedicated circuits are set to 75 feet. Appliances are set to 20. Cable TV and telephone are 75. Subpanels are 75. So keep those default settings in mind. You'll see them actually come into play here once we create a little job. I did forget to mention one more thing in the program under the settings is the user maintenance. You want to set yourself up as a user. When you go to the ad screen, you can fill this information in. And I'll just show you my setup here. You want to put a username and a password. Those fields are not case sensitive, but they'll always be in capitals. Same thing with the initials here, and then your full name can be uppercase, lowercase. If you're on a standalone computer, the administrator, you want to be the administrator so you can get into the setup. If you happen to be using this on a network, then the administrator is the only one who can get into the setup. Okay, so let's go create a little practice job and give you a little tour of the program. You just click on New at the top left. So here's where you tell it you want to use the residential format. You check this little bullet here, and we're just going to call this Vision House. Now you don't have to fill anything else on this screen. The bid due date is important to the price updating though. So I'm going to click on the 25th. So if any updates, any Epic or you manually update any prices in your database between now and the 25th and rerun the reports, they'll automatically have the new prices. On the work description, we're just going to put in new tract home model 101. So it's automatically filled my name in as the estimator. You can put the square footage in. You can put in a customer and an address and all that, but you don't have to fill that in. You can come back and do it later or just not even do it at all. We're going to hit OK. Now this little prompt about preset versus calculated, most of the time you're probably going to leave this uncalculated. We've had a few people who prefer not to use the prices that are generated by the program. They have their own set unit pricing, so they use preset. But otherwise, if you use calculated, the program will calculate the unit prices of the assemblies based on the current price of material and labor in your system. So what's going to come up here in just a couple seconds is a little split screen format here. Now this left side of the screen we call a tally sheet. You can actually print this. You'll see over here to the right is print tally sheets. And you can use this like a little takeoff sheet out in the field or even in your office. Just fill the quantities in, and then when you get back to the program, use that like a little takeoff sheet to do the input. But the idea here on the tally sheet is you've got a list of the common assemblies. Now, keep in mind, you can add to that list, just like everything we've ever done with any of our database programs, is you can change it. It's not meant to be a final or a final product until you get in there and tweak it and customize it. So, but what we've done here is we've selected some common assemblies, and we'll do most of our entries from this left side of the screen. When we need to put something in that's not on the left side of the screen, one of the options is from over here to the right side, and you've got several hundred residential assemblies. And we've got a couple more options if it isn't there. But let's start with the standard way of doing things. I'm just going to throw some quantities in here. Going to put in some duplex receptacles, some GFIs, some tamper resistant. Actually, let's make them mostly tamper resistant. Let's do 0 here, and we'll do 45 here. A weatherproof GFI, a couple of those. You've also got weather-resistant GFIs with an in-use cover. And we're going to skip down here and throw in some single-pole switches. Going to do some 3-way switches. A couple of 4-way switches. So this is a 2-gang, S/S, that's a 2-gang switch assembly. And this is a single pole and a 3-way. This is 2 3-ways. And we can even do dimmers. We can do, so when you get to this category, the appliance and kitchen category, these all typically have their own home runs. So this microwave circuit will have one of those. We'll do a dishwasher, we'll do a stove, we'll do an oven, we'll do a garbage disposal, do a hood fan, refrigerator, washing machine, we'll do a hot water heater circuit. Now I'm going to skip the 30 amp air conditioning unit because I'm going to put a 40 amp one in. And we'll put a dryer. So this next category is your lighting. Now these fixtures all have prices. There's ways to do this where you can put a quote in, or you can have it owner furnished. We're going to do 12 of the 4-inch, 15 of the 6-inch. We'll do some under cabinet lights. Couple of LED wraparounds for the garage. And then this last category here, we call it other, is things like smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors. You also have the combination ones. Bath fans, these are the builder series. We do have some premium ones in here too. We'll just do some of the cheap ones here. So the telephone data outlet, we're going to put in 7 of those. Oh, that's a TV outlet, sorry. We'll do 8 of those. And we'll do 7 of the telephone. Okay, so these are basically the home runs. So what you enter here is the number of standard 15 amp circuits that you have in the house that aren't for dedicated circuits, just your general purpose. Now, if you need some arc breaker circuits, arc fault breaker circuits, we can put some of those in. Again, it gives you the home run, gives you a circuit breaker. 20 amp general purpose again. Let's say we've got a couple, 3 of those. And then we can go all the way down here to the service. We'll put a 200 amp service in. And I'm going to skip down here and do some outdoor lights. Let's say we've got a couple of standard ones and a couple of upgraded ones. Okay. You could even put a bath fan in here, or a bath bracket light. Okay, so there's a good just starting selection of some basic stuff you see in a standard home, tract home, maybe even a semi-custom home. So we're going to hit takeoff here, down at the bottom left. And it's going to go through and input all those items that are on this left side of the screen. Again, this is called the tally sheet. Not sure who came up with that name, but it wasn't me. So you'll see it's going to start moving down the screen here as it enters each of these items. Now, they're going to the Audit Trail. If you're getting familiar with the commercial program, the Audit Trail is what shows you what you've entered and where you can go to make changes. It just doesn't show on the screen here. There's a button over here on the right, which we'll go to in a minute, for the Audit Trail, where you can go and see what's entered, see what's in the assemblies, and make changes. Let it work through these assemblies here. So next, we'll take a look at the Audit Trail, show you how to make a couple changes, and we'll show you how to add some things that aren't on the tally sheet. Let's take a while to work through this. Seems like it's slowing down, actually. There's a mistake. I didn't mean to put 60 of those in. We'll fix that in a second. Okay, there we go, just about there. Okay, so to review what we've entered and even make changes, you come over here to the right and hit Audit Trail. And I put in 60 of the arc breaker home runs. We're just going to simply change that right here. It shows you what's in it. Gives you the 14.2 Romex, gives you staples, gives you some arc breakers, arc circuit breakers. So to change it, you just hit Edit at the bottom. And we're going to change it to 6 right there. And again, you can even change what's in that assembly. If you wanted a longer home run, change it to 100 feet or 80 feet or whatever distance you like for that particular entry. I'm just going to change the 60 to 6, hit OK, and it'll go back to the Audit Trail and you'll see the change it just made right there. Now, to go back to the takeoff, you click over here to the left where it says takeoff, or it's probably easier actually just to hit close. And it'll go right back to the split screen format. So I mentioned I want to put a couple things in that aren't on that list, and I might even want to add them to the list. We'll start with the doorbell chime. There's the hardwired and the wireless ones. We'll do one of the hardwired ones. It's still probably more conventional. Now, if I leave this check to add it to the tally sheet, it'll give me an option to update, to make a change to the tally sheet. We'll hit OK. We're going to hit the back button to go back and pick another item, another assembly. Under the circuit services, panels, and connections, you've got an option for dedicated circuits. That's where you're going to find the AC. Here's a 40 amp 2-pole air conditioning unit. We'll put in 2 of those. Now you'll see them down here at the bottom part of the screen. We're going to go ahead and put them into the job by hitting F2 takeoff. And if we want to make those permanent changes to the tally sheet, first of all, we can move them. I'll maybe leave the doorbell down there. We're going to drag this 40 amp 2-pole air conditioning. You just drag and drop it wherever you want it. Wherever you click, it's going to put it right in front of there. Now, at this point, I can either save this tally sheet under a different name or update one of the ones that's here. That's at the top right where it says Save Tally Sheets. So I can update this one called Brian's New Tally Sheet, or I can hit Save Screen and add a new one. I'm just going to update it. Now, whichever one is at the top of the list is the one it defaults to, the one it opens up when you start the program. But you can jump back and forth between these. If I want to switch down here to a different one, I just double click. So even when you're in the job, you can pick a different tally sheet. Now, finally, if I don't find something on the tally sheet or in the residential assemblies, I can go to this takeoff tab down here, and I can do anything from the entire commercial residential database. I can even use the branch circuits and cable takeoff, or I can come down here to miscellaneous items and just pick items from the entire database. So let's say I want to throw in a couple of ground rods. I can use the search button here to search for a ground rod. It's not case sensitive, but it does have to be spelled exactly correctly. So here's some ground rods with clamps. I'm going to do 5/8 by 10 foot, and I'll put in 2 of those. Now you can always put temporary items in. If, let's say I want to put some money in for a permit or something like that. You could also do this in the final summary, but if you just want to put some money in for a permit, I'll leave the labor at 0 and hit takeoff. Actually, the example I think that I use more often in the commercial version, I just put in a widget. Just any oddball item that you come across that you want to put some money in for. Widgets are about 25 bucks. They take a half an hour to put in, and we've got 2 of them. Now finally, last but certainly not least, is the ability to pull temporary items in from Epic. The second T here is where you go to get an item from Epic. You click it, you hit add on the right, you hit OK to add an item. So let's say I want to pull in a couple of Maestro Series Maestro Series Lutron dimmers. You hit import at the bottom. If Epic's not running, it'll launch it. And we're going to come up to the top here on Epic and hit the button to look up by manufacturer, that little blue folder. And we're going to hit L for Lutron and come down here and double click on Lutron. Now there's over 8,000 items in the Lutron catalog. I don't want to scroll through all these. I'm going to hit the button to look up by catalog number. I'm going to type in MA because I think all of the Maestro dimmers start with MA. And then I can just choose one here. I could type in more characters if I want, like if I type in a 6, it'll come down here. But here's an ivory one, here's an almond one. Now I'm going to export this to my job by hitting the 3rd button from the top right. If you don't fill labor in here now, it'll prompt you later. I'm going to put a half an hour for that. It's going to prompt me for the quantity here. I'm going to put in 2 of them. Now that $42.40 represents the cost of material plus tax plus a half an hour of labor at my $27 rate. No markup yet. We'll get to that in just a minute. So that's basically the takeoff process. You've got 4 options. You can use these tally sheets over here on the left with the standard items. You can go to the right side and pick from several hundred residential assemblies. If that doesn't have what you're looking for, you can go to the miscellaneous takeoff and pick anything from the commercial and residential database. Just so you know, most of the residential items that aren't in the commercial are under specialty, under residential, and you'll see the assemblies, all the parts. And then you can put temporary items in. You can also pull items out of Epic. Okay, I don't see any questions yet, so I'm going to move forward to the reports. This is the easy part. Now, these reports have some kind of odd names. Again, I'm not sure who made them up, but the bid price is the one I like to start with. And here's where you can put your markup in. So if you want to mark everything up 30%, that's all you do. Now this report, we're going to see the cost and we're going to see the price that's been marked up. Guess I need to restart my computer. It doesn't usually take this long for these reports to pop up. Okay, so there's the bid price with before markup. Here's with the 30% added. If we come all the way down here to the bottom, that's our total cost of $9,400, and with the 30% added, it's $12,000. So this is probably a report you wouldn't give to the customer unless there's some kind of unusual situation. This next report to the left, you definitely could give to the customer, called the bid price final. We'll leave the same markup in, but this one's just going to show the selling price, the price with that 30% added. So that's the total down here. Another report I like is the labor cost summary, because I guess, you know, like any job, but maybe residential more so than commercial, labor is what's going to make or break the job. So you need to know how many hours you've got budgeted. And this report will tell you that. There's our total number of hours. So if we've got a two-man crew, one journeyman and one helper, or one electrician and one helper, we would split those hours. They'd each have a little more than 80 hours to budgeted to the job. The assembly list is handy. This is something you might give to the customer again if they just need a list of what you're providing. This might even be part of your proposal, is to give them a breakdown of all the things that are included. Garbage disposal, refrigerator, 200 amp service, 4 lamp bath bracket, etc. Now, we also included the summary, the job totals from the commercial version, because a lot of people like that. So if you want to do the overhead and profit there, you want to take it off here, change that back to 0. And then when you go to job totals here, again, those of you that are familiar with the commercial version, you'll see the same format that you're used to from that. So there's the total material up at the top. Oops. The 55.51. Sales tax is added automatically. If you had quoted lighting or quoted items, you could add those here. There's the total hours. There's the hourly rate. We saw that in the beginning of the setup. And you could add things like direct job expenses. If you've got equipment rentals, you could have put the permit here. But if I want to do overhead and profit, maybe I do 20% overhead and 10% profit. So if I uncheck this box to include the overhead and the profit, it would give me a straight 30%. So there's my total. So again, just make sure, you know, that you don't unintentionally put a markup in when you run the bid price and the bid price final reports, and then put it in again over here. Okay. So I think that's going to wrap it up here. I appreciate everybody coming to the webinar here today.